Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Jedi, and I'm still coming to you from the thriving metropolis of Rochester, New York. Today I'm going to show you how to make your own gear. Even if you're not handy, anybody can do this. I'm going to show you how to make a very cost-effective, very lightweight, and yet very strong ground cloth or footprint for your tent. You're going to go to your local big box hardware store, home improvement type store, and get yourself one of these. This is the brand they carry at my store. You might find a different brand at your store. But it's this window insulation shrink kit, okay? And it comes in two flavors. There's the regular, which is this, and then there's this one, which is the premium, okay? I've used both. What's the difference? The only difference is the premium is twice as thick as the regular, the standard, okay? So twice as thick means, hey, twice as strong, right? More puncture proof, more abrasion resistant, more rip proof, and so on. It also means twice as heavy. So I've tried them both, and this seems to work fine. I've never had one puncture a hole yet or rip on the edge. I've never taken them out for more than a week, 5-6 nights, but they've worked fantastic. So this is the size that I recommend for like 1 and 2 person tent, 62 inches wide by 210 inches long. And here's why. My tent, my tarp tent double rainbow LI, that's a 2-person tent technically, but I'm going to take it on the Appalachian Trail because it weighs less than 2 pounds. Weighs about 29 ounces, I believe, just for the tent and the poles. So, you know, I just want something super lightweight, and it's 50 inches wide, my tent, 50 inches wide and 88 inches long, okay? So this is 62 inches wide, 210 inches long. So I can cut, now imagine that, 62 inches wide by 210 inches long. If I cut it in half lengthwise, then I'll have two pieces that are each 62 inches by 105 inches long. So 62 inches wide, my tent's only 50 inches wide, and 105 inches long, my tent's only 88 inches long. So now I can take those and I can trim them to size. Now, what I like to do, I know the common wisdom, conventional wisdom, is that you cut your footprint slightly smaller than the actual footprint of your tent. So a 50-inch tent, 50 inches wide by 88 inches long, like mine, you might go 48 or even 46 inches wide by 86 or even 84 inches long. I tried that and I didn't like it because I got all kinds of forest duff around those, 2 to 4 inches around the edge of the tent. So I went back to the drawing board and cut another footprint that was actually a couple inches wider and a couple inches longer than my tent, so that I had complete coverage and the tent didn't get dirty. Now I know people say, well, the rain will run off your tent and hit the edge of the ground cloth and then run underneath your tent. In which case I say, A, why is that a bad thing? What do I care if there's water running, a little bit of water under my tent, right? Number two, the floor of my tent is Dyneema composite fabric, so it's waterproof. Nothing's going to happen. Now, if it's a huge deluge, yeah, you don't want a river of water going under your tent and it's like a waterbed in there. But if some rain runs under, so what? I don't understand what the big concern there is. I understand you don't want your footprint, a foot out beyond your tent on either side, and really catching a lot of rain. But if it's if it's an inch or two over the side, just to give you that complete coverage, so that your tent isn't on the forest floor, and you're not getting that forest duff and dirt on there, I think that's fine. The reason I don't want my tent bottom dirty is because the forest duff and dirt and sand and grit and stuff, it's abrasive, right? It's over time, it's going to kind of wear away a little bit at that fabric, and it could also get into your zippers, right? The Tarp Tent Double Rainbow LI has zipper doors, and grit and dirt will really do a number on your zippers, and they'll start to get stuck, or they'll jump the track and you won't be able to get them back on. So I want to keep everything as clean as possible. The thing I love about having a ground cloth, and I know they say the DCF tents, you don't need a ground cloth, the bathtub floor is plenty strong, you don't need it. Here's what I love. In the morning, when I'm packing up my tent, I need somewhere to fold it up and then roll it up. a DCF tent, you shouldn't stuff. You should always roll it up, because you stuff it and it's going to weaken the fiber. Where are you going to do that? It's been raining. It's dewy on the ground. Maybe it's muddy. What are you going to do? You're going to have somebody hold it up in the air with you and do it? No, you're going to be doing it on the ground, and it's going to be even dirtier as you're rolling it up on the ground in the dirt, and it's wet and it's So you got this ground cloth. It's completely clean on top and probably mostly dry, unless some of the water went under, as I mentioned. So what a great work surface, right? You take your stakes out of your tent, you fold the sides in. Now you've got this big, clean, relatively dry ground cloth that you can kneel on. You can roll the tent on. You don't have to worry about dragging the tent through the dirt and the pine needles and sand and whatever else is on the ground. So that's a great use for that. So here's what I did. Here's the other thing I recommend you do. So I recommend you label. See how I've labeled it: tarp tent, double rainbow LI. That's which tent, because we have several tents, my wife and I. And then the dimensions, 46 by 84. So this is the one I cut. That's 4 inches narrower and 4 inches shorter than my tent floor, so that it doesn't extend. It only extends up to 2 inches of the floor on either dimension. Okay, and I labeled it. Here's another one I made, and I labeled it. But look what happens. See the writing? I don't know if you can see that. The writing's all wearing off, right? Because even with a Sharpie, this is plastic, and over time it just wears off the writing. So then I got smart. I wasn't smart to begin with until I thought of this. So I labeled it tarp tent. I abbreviated DR, double rainbow, LI, 52 by 84 inches. And I guess my tent is 50 by 80 inches long, not 88 inches long. So anyway, 52 by 84 inches long, or maybe it's 82 inches. I don't know. In any event, I made this wider than my tent floor. So no, it is 88 inches. Okay, that's right. I remember I was trying to save this material, and I didn't have a piece that was long enough to extend beyond the length. So it's wider. This one happens to be wider than my tent, but it's shorter than my tent's bathtub floor. So this is kind of a funky dimension for this tent, but you'll notice underneath it I wrote 0.75 mil. That's the standard thickness. Okay, I dropped these on the floor. That's this one, 0.75 mil. This one is the 1.5 mil, twice as thick as this one, twice as heavy. So I've had ground cloths with both, and the one that's twice as heavy, it's thicker, you can tell. It's this one. This one is the thicker one. A ground cloth that's about roughly 4 feet wide by 7 feet long in this double thick material, the 1.5 mil, weighs a little over 3 ounces. This one, that's the 0.75 mil. This ground cloth right here, as you can see how much thinner and lighter it is than this bulky thing. This one weighs about 1.5 ounces, and it's amazingly strong. It's very super thin. It's almost like cellophane, or not quite like what a dry cleaner bag feels like. It's a little slipperier, more slipperier than that. But here's the key that I wanted to mention. I showed you how this one, the writing was all wearing off. I just showed you that, right? All that writing right here is all coming off. So what you want to do is you want to identify the tent, if you have more than one tent. Even if you don't, just for future reference, identify which tent, identify the size in case you decide to cut different sizes and experiment, and then identify the thickness, 0.75 mil, in case you decide to experiment with the double thick ones and the regular ones like I did. And then put packing tape over it. I've got 2 strips of regular old shipping tape, that you use to tape up boxes when you're shipping stuff. Put that over the top of it so that ink doesn't wear off, and then you're good to go. And the final recommendation I'll make is, if you want to experiment with sizes, and maybe you're not sold on the idea that the ground cloth can be wider and longer than your tent floor, and you think, no, I want it a little bit smaller, I don't want the rain going under, for whatever reason, that's fine. But I would recommend still cutting it wider and longer at first, okay? Cut it maybe 2 to 4 inches wider and 2 to 4 inches longer than you need, so that you get a 1 to 2 inch overhang, sticking out from the bottom of your tent. And then if you decide in the future you really don't like that, you really want to trim it, great. Trim an inch off the length and trim an inch off the width, and do it in the opposite corner of your label, because you don't want to be having to cut your label off. You want to put this label. See, this is in the corner. Okay. Do this in one of the corners. I do mine in the upper left corner, and then when you go to trim it from the opposite corner. So the bottom that's at the opposite of the label, and the side that's at the opposite from the label. So you don't accidentally start on the side where the label is and wind up cutting off part of your label. So, because you can always trim off some, but you can't add any once you've cut it. So if you cut it too small to begin with and you don't like it and you want a bigger one, now you've just wasted the plastic. Those are pretty cheap, by the way. And I should also add one more thing before I forget. There's 2 sheets in here, right here, 2-pack. So I can get 2 ground cloths out of each of those sheets. I can get 4 ground cloths out of this, and those ground cloths will last maybe a couple months. And that pack, by the way, cost me between $12 and $13, between 13 and 14 with tax. So I'm getting ground cloths for about $3 each. 4 ground cloths, about $3 each. And I cut it myself. The last tip I'll give you is you want to. It's all folded up in there like the old maps. The old paper maps. If you're old enough to remember paper maps, you're going to want to find a big work surface. Now I'm lucky. We have a basement. Little gymnasium, a little corner of our basement it's our workout room. It's our home gym. It's just I put down some rubber flooring in there, and we have an exercise bike and a rowing machine and some free weights and stuff. So I lay the plastic out on that, and you got to get real smooth because it wants to fold itself back up again because it's been folded up, like a map. You got to get it out real smooth. You may need some weights even to put it down the corner so it doesn't start to kind of draw itself back together. You want it to be completely out so when you measure it, you're getting an accurate measurement. Once I've got it all flattened out, I take a straight edge. I have a big T-square. I'm looking at it right now. It's about a 4-foot long T-square, and I measure it at several points. Okay, I want it 84 inches long and 52 inches wide or whatever. And I measure and I make some Sharpie marks every couple feet, all the way down one dimension and across the other dimension. I lay the T-square down, line up the edge of the T-square right along where those Sharpie marks are, and then I take a Sharpie and I draw a line down both dimensions, and then I take a box cutter with a very sharp. You want a new blade. You don't want to be dragging a dull blade across this plastic and tearing it, okay? Because then you've got a rough edge, and that's where a new tear is going to start across your ground cloth. You want a nice clean cut. So get a nice clean fresh blade. You put that T-square down right along that line you just drew, and then you don't even have to push very hard because you don't want to push down into your floor. I don't know what kind of floor you're going to do this on. If you don't have a floor that you feel comfortable doing this on because you don't want to cut the floor, just take a piece of wood. If you have a piece of plywood or a 2x4 or something, lay the plastic on top of that right where you're going to cut it, and then do it that way. But I just literally put the box cutter down at the starting point, and then I don't even really push. I mean, maybe just a little bit with my finger. I just let the weight of the box cutter go, because this stuff is super thin. I mean, this is super flimsy, super. I mean, it's like a dry cleaner bag. It's about that thickness, 0.75 mil. So you're just going to let the weight of the box cutter go right along the edge of that straight edge, T-square, whatever you're using, a board, whatever you need, to get a straight edge. And you just let the weight of it just drag that fresh, really sharp blade right down the plastic, and it'll cut it, trust me. And then once you get it all the way done, you slowly go back up and separate, make sure you didn't miss a spot. Sometimes, the blade will kind of skip. You'll have a little piece that's still hanging on. You'll have to kind of nick that to free it. But that's all there is to it. And then you do it the other dimension, obviously, and you'll just have to discard the scraps that's left over. And then before you fold it back up, label the corner like I did with the Sharpie, write in which tent, the size, and the thickness, and then put that packaging tape, shipping tape, whatever you want to call it, over the top of it to protect it, so that lettering doesn't rub off. So that's all there is to it. I hope you have luck with it. You know, it's cheap enough that you can afford to screw up one or two. You know, at $3 a pop. You know, for a ground cloth. And like I said, I haven't yet to need to replace one of my ground cloths. Like I have 3 or 4 different dimensions and the different thicknesses that I've experimented with. I'm going with a thinner one because it's half the weight, even though, you know, it's only 1.5 ounces heavier for the thicker one. But, you know, 1.5 ounces. If you can save 1.5 ounces when you're backpacking, that's worth doing, especially if you get the same performance. So it's going to be lighter than anything you can buy, any custom-made ground cloth that they sell for your tent. It's cheap, it's easy, anybody can do it. It doesn't require a lot of skills or special equipment. Just a straight edge, a Sharpie, and a box cutter, or you know, some kind of a scalpel, razor blade, something, very sharp edge. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed it, and good luck out there making your own ground cloths, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye, guys.